Welcome to Your Story Matters. My name is Linda Olson. I'm the founder of Wealth Through Stories and Your Story Matters Masterclass. Today I'm privileged to interview expert AlanSteinjr. Alan is a coach, consultant, speaker, and author with an expertise in improving organization, performance, cohesion, and accountability. He spent 15 years working with the highest performing basketball players on the planet, including NBA superstar Kevin Durant. He now travels the world teaching organizations how to utilize the same strategies in business that elite athletes use to perform at a world-class level. Alan has an amiable divorced father of two sons, Luke and Jack, and a daughter, Lila, and lives just outside of Washington, D.C. Alan, welcome to Your Story Matters Masterclass.
Thank you, Linda. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are honored and grateful to have you join us and take time out of your very busy schedule and all the traveling that you do. So tell us a little bit about your story and how did you get started in working with these world-class athletes?
Basketball has been my number one passion for as long as I can remember. I think I played on my first organized team when I was in kindergarten and just immediately fell in love with the game. And the game has been very, very good to me, and it's how I've made most of my living, and I'm very thankful to have had a chance to travel the world and have some incredible experiences and meet some wonderful people through the game. And about a year ago, I decided that I wanted to take my message and expand outside of the four walls of a gym and share all of the life lessons that the game has taught me with groups that weren't players and coaches. So that was when I made the dip into, I guess we'd call it the corporate world, and share these lessons on accountability and leadership and how to be a good teammate. So I'll forever be indebted to the game of basketball. It's been really good to me.
Wow, that's what an incredible opportunity. And I just love what you're doing with it. You know, taking what you've learned from all of that in basketball and applying that now to the corporate market and wherever you speak. So I know that you can't make the kind of transition that you've made without costing you something. There are always pain points involved in any transition. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you?
For sure. And you're right. And I believe, in order to have any type of happiness or fulfillment or success or significance, you have to be willing to make some type of sacrifice. That this concept that everyone can have everything simply isn't true. You have to pick and choose which things are going to be a priority and what's going to be most important, which means certain things have to be sacrificed. And more times than not, when there is a sacrifice being made, there will be some discomfort or some pain, as you alluded to. For me, I guess, and I don't usually use the word pain because I spend my entire life in a state of discomfort. And most of that is intentional because I've always felt that when you put yourself in discomfort, that's usually the prerequisite to growth, and that any type of transition will cause discomfort. But if you do so strategically, that discomfort will certainly benefit you in the long run. And for me, I had to make the decision and the sacrifice to leave an industry where I had spent my entire career building up my name and brand recognition and credibility, and take the leap into an area where I didn't have any of those things. I say with great pride that I've never had a corporate job in my entire life, and now corporations from around the world bring me in to lead and teach their groups, and that was a challenge. But where I feel very fortunate is that I've been self-employed and been an entrepreneur my whole life. So I think I'm fairly resilient to taking those types of risks, and where it might have caused someone some more discomfort, maybe if they've been in a secure job, a 9-to-5, and then after 15 years decided to make a leap to the entrepreneurial side, I would imagine that would be much scarier for them. But since this is what I've always done, I really didn't even think twice. And I've got a lot of confidence in my ability to use my resources and use my network and use the skill sets that I've acquired to make good things happen. So it was a sacrifice for sure, but it was one I was very willing to make.
Wow. I like the way you said that. It's really about learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so as you did that, and it sounds like it really became a way of life for you that, the transition wasn't any big deal. For most people, like you pointed out, it is a very big deal
Yes.
because they're stepping into places they've never been before. And most of the time, that creates a lot of doubt and fear and all kinds of things because you just don't know what that unknown is like. But for you, because you're used to that place, it wasn't that big a transition. So I like that a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about, can you give us an idea of some of the principles that you teach that you learned maybe behind the scenes that most people do not get to see?
Sure. Well, while we're on the theme, one of the main things I've learned is that high performers, they don't fear change. They actually embrace it because they know that change is constant and that it's unavoidable. And especially in a digitally driven world that we live in today, change is literally happening every second of every day. And since we can't, alter that fact, there's no sense in trying to resist it. I always like to say you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And that's the way that I've tried to embrace these types of changes. Now, what you just mentioned, and you mentioned perfectly, change does cause fear and anxiety and discomfort. And it's hard to change that part. But what we can change is how we view discomfort. And it can either be something that scares you, or it can be something that you can acknowledge, as I mentioned before, is a prerequisite to growth and is not a nice to have. It's a requirement for you to move forward in your life and to develop and to grow. We have to learn how to accept and embrace change. And one thing I found, I use the terminology transition instead of change. I feel when I'm speaking with folks, when you hear the word transition, it usually doesn't cause any anxiety. When you hear the word change, it does, because when we hear the word change, we immediately think of how that's going to disrupt our routine and disrupt what we're comfortable. And most people hear the word change, and the first thing they think of is, what am I going to lose? What do I have to sacrifice? What do I have to give up? And that already puts us in a very negative state of mind. So I prefer transition. And if you can think back, there's so many pivotal moments in our lives where we go through a transition. And if you look back now, we were probably a little bit apprehensive and fearful at first. And more times than not, those transitions turned out to be some of the most joyous times in our life. Think of maybe when you were in kindergarten and then moving on to first grade. That's a huge transition. Or maybe from being in middle school to moving on to high school. Or living with your parents to moving out into the real world. Or being single and then being married. Or being single and married to then having children. Or job to job or house to house. Lots of these transitions in the moment can give us some anxiety. But once we look back, as I said, more times than not, they're some of the best things that have ever happened to us. And I think having that frame of mind is really important. And when we look at working, especially with elite athletes, if you can picture somebody doing push-ups, when the push-ups really start to get hard and your chest and your shoulders are on fire and they're burning, most people want to stop because of the discomfort. But actually, it's every repetition that you do after that. Those are the ones that make you stronger. Those are the ones that actually, get you to that next level. And we just need to have that same approach, whether it's in business, whether it's in parenting, whether it's in a job change, that yes, I'm going to have some discomfort, but it's going to be very temporary. And when I break through to the other side of discomfort, everything I ever want is on that side. And having that mindset has helped me weather that storm anytime there's a transition in my life.
Wow. You've given us a lot to think about, and I love the way you address that. Rather than change, to look at it as transition, because you're right, it isn't. It's really a much more positive way to say it. One of the keys that I've taught for years, and that is that whole idea of embracing change, embracing those transitions in our life, because to me, all that is part of our story, and it's part of embracing our story. Most people, maybe not most people, many people are stuck in their story because they haven't been willing, or perhaps haven't known how to embrace their story, that part of that transition or growth in their life. And I just love the way you have worded this, because somehow it does seem to make it a lot easier when we just look at making a transition into that next level, wherever that is, in our business, in our family life, in our personal growth. But as we do embrace that story and own our story, you're right, it's like those extra push-ups. Then things really happen. I love it.
And I will say this, I don't mean to make it sound like it's easy, because there's lots of things in life that are basic in principle, which this definitely is, but it doesn't make it easy. And I have a tremendous amount of empathy and compassion for people that are going through some very difficult transitions and change. I know when I'm saying it right now, it sounds very a matter of fact. And certainly there are transitions that are beyond our control. Maybe a loved one gets sick. Maybe someone loses a job. And I don't mean to make it sound like those things are really easy to go through. They're not. But I've also found that some of the best things in life that we want, there's not an easy path to get there. And if there was an easy path, it'd be the one that everyone takes. And easy is what everyone does. So that's not the case. So even though these are very basic principles, they still take grit. They still take fortitude. They still take self-confidence. But the key is just knowing that change is coming at us whether we like it or not. So with that being a fact, we choose on how we respond and look at it. And we can either be fearful and anxious and cower at the sight of change, or we can have some grit and resilience and confidence and break through it. Really, it's up to us. And I believe in conditioning ourselves, obviously, for the latter. But I certainly don't want any of your viewers to think that some of these major life changes and transitions are easy, because it's not. But that's okay. The great stuff's not supposed to be easy.
Well, thanks for just reinforcing that. Clearly, no one can become a world-class athlete and know that they haven't gone through a very difficult journey to go there. I mean, you really have to want that kind of position. That's why we don't have more.
Absolutely.
It's not easy. It is difficult. They work so hard and earn every bit of respect that they get.
Yeah. And you can say the same thing for a successful business owner or CEO, or someone that's, maybe been married successfully for 30 years, or someone that's the parent to 4 or 5 children. Like, you're not able to do those things successfully unless you are getting in the reps and you are putting in the time during those unseen hours. And most of those things, whether you're talking about growing a business or writing a book or making a basketball team, there's going to be so many hurdles and so much discomfort that you have to weather. And a lot of that is during the unseen hours when no one else is watching. And I think as society, sometimes we forget that. And you see a successful business owner or an author or a musician or an athlete, and you just think, wow, boy, they're lucky that they get to do that. It's like, whoa, luck has nothing to do with it. If you knew the hours of preparation that they put in, and many times it takes decades of preparation before someone's able to do some of the things that I think a lot of people take for granted when we just see them haphazardly on TV.
Well said. So, Alan, tell us, what are some of your long-term goals? Where are you wanting to take all these wonderful gems and nuggets that you share?
What's interesting is I don't 100% know yet. I'm still in kind of a feeling out process and exploring where I can take this. And that's exciting and exhilarating to me. I know that at my core, I love serving other people, and I love pouring into other people and helping people. So part of it's just going to be figuring out what's the best way to do that. At present, I do a lot of speaking and running workshops. I'm working on my first book. I'm working on some online curriculums and some things. So I'm trying a bunch of different mediums to see, one, what do I enjoy the most, and two, what actually resonates with the people that I'm trying to impact. If it's not really up to me, it's up to the people that I'm trying to serve to dictate what's the best way for me to do that. As a father of 3, Being home and being present with my children is really important to me. So I know that I don't want to be one of those speaking warriors that's on the road 300 days a year speaking, because that will detract from my ability to be a present father. And that's, as we mentioned at the beginning of our talk, that's a sacrifice I'm not willing to make. That being a present father is really important to me. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but I'm loving this new space that I'm in. I love the new audience that I serve, and it'll take some time to really hone what's the best way in which to serve them. But I'm enjoying that exploratory process as I'm in it.
That's great. Embracing those transitions, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I think in some respects we're all in transition in one way or another, as long as we're growing and open to new things. So, what golden nugget could you leave with our audience today?
I would say the foundational principle that I talk to most groups about is closing the gap between what we know we're supposed to do and what we do. There's a good chance that everything I've just shared with your listeners right now, they're things they already know. I didn't tell them something they don't know, but whether or not they actually do it is completely different. And that's called a performance gap. And every single one of us has them in different areas in our life. And closing that gap between what we know we're supposed to do and what we actually do is how we increase performance. And when we increase performance and we become the best version of ourselves, that leads to increased happiness and fulfillment and significance and influence and all of the things that we talk about that we want. In 2018, lack of knowledge is very rarely the problem for any of us, because anything that we don't know, we can find within 2 seconds on our phone or on our laptop. So it's not the knowledge where we get stuck. It's the implementation of that knowledge and putting things into action is where we get frustrated, is where we get stuck in the ruts, is where we get, sometimes undermined. So closing that gap is important. The easiest way to illustrate it is using health and fitness as an example. Most people know what foods are healthy to eat. Most people know how much sleep they should get every night. Most people know that they should work out a couple of times a week for, an extended period of time. They kind of know what they're supposed to do. And yet some people don't do that. And, then the question is why? And we have these gaps in every area of our life. Some people have it with health and fitness. Other people have it in their relationships. Some people have it with their finances. Warren Buffett has given everyone the blueprint on how you can use your money to build wealth and be successful. He's told everyone exactly what to do, yet there's only one Warren Buffett. Why are more people not doing the things that he said? And I find it's for a few reasons. Often we're not living in the present moment. As you've said so perfectly, we fear change, so we're very resistant to doing that. And then we don't take advantage of the unseen hours. So really, the number one nugget I would have would be work on yourself to create habits to help you close that gap between what you know you should do and what you actually do.
Wow. You've given us a lot to think about and broken it down in our everyday lifestyle, because there's always room to grow for each one. Alan, I know you have a very special gift for us today. Can you share that with our listeners?
Well, I've been a part, of a lot of different email lists. And when I created my email list, I wanted to make sure it was one that was constantly offering value. And it wasn't about pitching anything. It wasn't about selling anything. It wasn't about anything other than just providing something tangible for people that were kind enough to follow. So anyone that opts in to my email list at AlanSteinjr.com will get a series of free downloadable PDFs that really reinforce a lot of the stuff that you and I have been discussing. There's book suggestions for leaders. There's the 52 life lessons that I've learned. I'm 42 years old, but I would consider it one life lesson per week for a year. How to be a good teammate. So it's kind of a pool of resources, and I only share these on my email list. So I don't post them on social media. I don't offer them anywhere else. So if any of your listeners wanted to opt into my email, I feel very confident that they'll get a string of free resources, no strings attached, that I'm hoping will add value to their life.
Thank you so much. Those are lots of gold nuggets. And Alan, I just want to thank you for joining us today. Like I said, I know you travel a lot in your busy schedule. You took time out to share with our listeners today. So thank you for that. And I just want to say to our listeners, thank you for taking the time out to join us. I know we're all very busy. And I know that these kind of stories can sometimes change our lives. And more than anything, I encourage you to take a look at your story and embrace those transitions in your life. Embrace the things that maybe you haven't been willing to look at, because they're the things that'll really catapult you to going much higher. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you.